Police sirens pierced the evening silence of Portland with flashes of red and blue light. Detective Clarence Spears parked his patrol car on the sidewalk across from the Silver Spoon restaurant, where a small crowd of onlookers had already gathered. His partner, Delilah Winston, turned off the radio and looked at the neon sign of the restaurant, which flickered in the darkness of the autumn evening. "Double murder in a decent neighborhood," she muttered, zipping up her jacket. "This doesn't look like a typical drug deal gone wrong." Spears nodded, checking his notebook. The call came in at 7:42 p.m., shooting at a restaurant, 2 dead. The first patrol cars arrived on the scene 7 minutes later and immediately called for detectives from the homicide division. They passed through the cordon, showing their badges to a young police officer who looked slightly nervous. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was tense. Several tables had been overturned, and broken plates and glasses littered the floor. Patrons and staff sat in the far corner of the room under the watchful eye of 2 officers. Sergeant Rogers, a stocky man in his 50s, approached the detectives with a tablet in his hands. "What do we have?" Spears asked, pulling latex gloves from his pocket. "Marvin Browning, 40 years old, and his wife Lauren, 35. Both have multiple gunshot wounds. The killers fled before we arrived. According to preliminary information, 2 masked men broke into the hall at approximately 7:30 p.m., opened fire on a couple at table number 7, and fled." Winston looked around. The restaurant was the kind of place where the average bill was at least $100 per person. Dim lighting, expensive furniture, paintings on the walls. This was clearly not a place for a random robbery. "Did the witnesses say anything useful?" she asked. "Not much so far. It all happened very quickly. Most of the patrons hid under the tables as soon as the shooting started. The bodies lay next to a table in the center of the room. Marvin Browning fell face down with his arms spread out. Bloodstains darkened his back. Lauren lay on her side, one hand still clutching a napkin. 2 half-empty glasses of red wine and uneaten dishes stood on the table. Spears crouched next to the man's body, carefully examining the wounds. 4 bullet holes in the back and 1 in the back of the head. The shooter was either a professional or a very cold-blooded individual. "They shot from close range," he said to Winston. "Look at the gunpowder on his shirt." Delilah walked around the table and leaned over the woman's body. Lauren Browning was dressed in an elegant black dress with a pearl necklace glistening around her neck. 3 bullet holes in her chest and 1 in her head. "Looks like an execution," she said quietly. "Someone wanted to make sure they were dead." On the table lay a small bouquet of red roses and a card that read, "Happy anniversary, my love." Winston picked it up carefully with tweezers. 15 years together, she read. The celebration ended in tragedy. Forensic expert Dwayne Carter arrived with a suitcase full of equipment. While he began photographing the scene, the detectives went to speak to the restaurant manager. A woman of about 45 with neatly styled hair introduced herself as Gloria Henderson, the manager. Her hands trembled slightly as she recounted what had happened. "Mr. and Mrs. Browning were regular customers," she said, adjusting her glasses repeatedly. "Every year on this day they reserved the same table. They were a very nice couple and always behaved themselves." "What time did they arrive today?" asked Spears. "The reservation was for 7 o'clock. They arrived right on time, as always. They ordered the usual, steak for him, salmon for her, and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon." "Tell me more about the attackers." Gloria closed her eyes, trying to remember the details. 2 men burst through the main entrance at about 7:30. They were wearing black balaclavas and dark clothes. One was tall, the other shorter. Both had guns in their hands. "Did they say anything?" "Nothing. They didn't even ask for money. They went straight to the Browning table and opened fire. It all took less than a minute. Then they ran out through the same entrance." Winston wrote down the statement in her notebook. "Did anyone try to stop them or follow them?" "Are you kidding?" Gloria shook her head. "Everyone hid. I hid behind the bar myself. Only after the shooting stopped did anyone dare to look out." The detectives questioned the other witnesses and got roughly the same story. The attack was quick and focused. No demands, no unnecessary casualties. The killers came for specific people. Carter motioned for Spears to come to the surveillance system in the back room. The cameras were working, he reported. The quality is good, but the killers were wearing masks, so their faces are blurred. The monitor showed footage from the camera above the entrance. At 7:31 p.m., two men in dark clothing and balaclavas entered the frame. One was noticeably taller than the other. Their movements were confident, without haste. "Is there a recording of them leaving?" Winston asked. "Of course, take a look." 47 seconds later, the same figures hurriedly left the restaurant. A dark car with the engine running was waiting for them outside. "Can you zoom in on the license plate?" Carter adjusted the settings, but the license plate was covered with a rag or piece of paper. "Smart," muttered Spears. "Can you identify the make and model?" "Looks like a Chevrolet Impala, dark blue or black, 3 or 4 years old. Can't say anything else for sure." The detectives returned to examining the bodies. The medical examiner had already arrived and was conducting a preliminary examination. "Dr. Williams, what can you tell us?" Spears asked him. The elderly doctor took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief. Death was almost instantaneous for both of them. Judging by the entry wounds, the caliber is 9 millimeters. The shots were fired from a distance of no more than 3 meters. The man has 5 wounds. The woman has 4. All of the shots were fatal. "Time of death?" "About an hour ago, give or take 10 minutes. I'll know for sure after the autopsy." Winston noticed Marvin's wallet lying on the floor next to the body. She picked it up with gloves and looked inside. "The money's there," she reported. $400 in cash, credit cards. The wife's purse is untouched too. "So robbery is out," Spears stated. "This was a targeted killing." While the forensic team finished their work at the scene, the detectives had the hardest part of their job ahead of them, notifying the relatives. They got the addresses from the victims' documents. Marvin's parents lived in a small house with a neatly trimmed lawn in a suburb of Portland. His father, Walter Browning, was a retired mechanic, and his mother, Dorothy, was a housewife. They received the news of their son's death with heavy silence. "Who could have done this?" Dorothy asked, wiping her tears with a handkerchief. "Marvin was a good man, a hard worker. He had no enemies." "Tell me about his business," Spears asked. "Did he have any problems with partners or competitors?" Walter shook his head. "He owned several pharmaceutical warehouses. He supplied pharmacies throughout the state. The business was doing well as far as I know." "Any problems at home?" "Arguments with his wife?" "Never," Dorothy said firmly. "They loved each other. Lauren was like a daughter to us." Lauren's parents, Robert and Mary Clark, lived in the neighborhood. Their reaction was just as painful. Robert, who worked as a mechanic in an auto repair shop, struggled to find the words. "Lauren worked at an insurance company," he said. "She was a customer service manager. No conflicts, she got along with everyone." Mary sobbed in the corner of the sofa. "They were so looking forward to having children," she said through her tears. "They were planning to have a baby next year. And now?" The next morning, the detectives went to Marvin's pharmaceutical company office. The building was located in an industrial area of the city, next to several warehouses. Marvin's deputy, Dennis Cole, a man in his 40s with a portly figure, met them in his office. The news of his boss's death clearly shook him. "It's impossible," he repeated, shaking his head. Marvin was a cautious man. Who could have killed him? "Did the company have any problems with competitors?" Winston asked. "Threats? Attempts to take over the business?" "Nothing like that. We worked honestly, all the documents are in order. Of course, there is competition, but not to that extent." "What about debts? Problems with suppliers?" Cole opened a folder with documents. "No, the financial situation is stable. Marvin always paid his suppliers and employees on time." Spears wrote down the contact details of the company's main partners for further investigation. Who else had access to information about the company's affairs? Chief Accountant Janet Rowe and Purchasing Manager Terrence Hill. We've all worked together for over 5 years. The detectives questioned the other employees, but no one could name any of Marvin's possible enemies. Everyone described him as a fair and honest employer. The picture was similar at the insurance company where Lauren worked. Her colleagues described her as a friendly and professional employee with no conflicts or problems. By the end of the first day of the investigation, the detectives had several theories. The first was that it was a contract killing related to Marvin's business. Perhaps one of his competitors or dissatisfied partners had decided to eliminate him in a radical way. The second theory was that it was an accident, that they had been victims of a mistake and the killers had confused them with someone else. "Tomorrow we'll continue interviewing partners and suppliers," said Spears, closing his notebook. "We also need to check the company's financial documents." Winston nodded, putting her notes away in the case file. It was too professional for a random crime. Someone really wanted them dead. The day ended without any significant breakthroughs, but the detectives knew this was only the beginning. The killers had left few clues, but every crime has its own logic. It remained to be found. The second day of the investigation began with an unexpected phone call. The station's secretary relayed a message to Spears that a woman named Candace Morgan, a friend of Lauren Browning, wanted to meet with the detectives. The woman said she had important information about the deceased. Candace worked as a beautician at a prestigious beauty salon in the city center. She was an elegant woman in her 30s, with flawless makeup and a neat hairstyle. When she met the detectives in a small cafe near the salon, she looked agitated and nervous. "I didn't know if I should tell you this," she began, fidgeting with a napkin. "But after what happened to Lauren, I can't keep quiet." Winston turned on the tape recorder and placed it on the table between them. "Tell us everything you think is important, Mrs. Morgan." "Miss," Candace corrected her. "You see, Lauren was my best friend. We've known each other since school and always shared our secrets. And then, a few months ago, she confessed something to me." Spears took a sip of coffee, waiting patiently for her to continue. "Lauren was having an affair," Candace said quietly, looking around. "She was cheating on Marvin." The detectives exchanged glances. This was information they hadn't expected to hear. "How long has this been going on?" Winston asked. "About 6 months, maybe a little longer. Lauren was very secretive about it, but I saw how she changed. She started dressing up more, buying new clothes, changing her hairstyle." "Did she ever mention the man's name?" Candace shook her head. "Never. She just said he was younger than her and worked at a bank. Very handsome," she said, "and incredibly passionate. Lauren was crazy about him." "What about Marvin? Did he suspect his wife was having an affair?" "I don't think so. Lauren was very careful. They would meet during her business trips or when Marvin was busy at the warehouse." Spears wrote this information down in his notebook. "When was the last time you spoke to Lauren about this affair?" "About a month ago. She seemed upset then. She said their relationship had reached an impasse and she had to end it." "Did she explain why?" "Not in great detail. Something about her lover becoming too pushy, demanding too much of her." Lauren realized she wasn't ready to destroy her marriage for this affair. Winston leaned forward. "Mrs. Morgan, do you think this affair could have been the motive for the murder?" Candace shrugged, confused. "I don't know. Lauren never said she was afraid of him, but men can be unpredictable when they're rejected." "Any more details about the lover? Appearance? Age? Place of work?" "Only what I've already told you. He works at a bank, younger than Lauren, very attractive." Lauren mentioned that he had beautiful eyes and a charming smile. After meeting with Candace, the detectives returned to the station to discuss the information they had gathered. Spears was skeptical about the jealous lover theory. "Too complicated for a love triangle," he said, looking through his notes. "Hiring 2 professional killers, organizing an attack in a public place. That requires serious money and connections." "Maybe this banker isn't as simple as he seems," Winston suggested. "But I agree that the business conflict theory seems more plausible." They decided to focus on checking Marvin's business contacts and put the search for his wife's lover on hold. At that moment, Officer Tommy Reynolds from the patrol unit walked into the office. "Detective Spears, I have some information on your case," he said, holding a report in his hand. "We found the car we were looking for." Spears looked up from his documents. "The dark blue Impala?" "That's the one. A patrol spotted it this morning in a parking lot near the shopping center on East Street. The license plate is covered, but it matches the description." "Is the car still there?" "Yes, we've got it under surveillance, but no one has approached it yet." The detectives immediately drove to the scene. The shopping center parking lot was quite large, and the car was parked in the far corner. away from the main flow of shoppers. It was a dark blue 2001 Chevrolet Impala with muddy license plates. Winston walked around the car, examining it closely. "The car is clean, recently washed," she noted. "Someone took care not to leave any traces." Spears peered inside through the window. "The interior looks fine too, but we need the owner." They approached the mall manager, an elderly man named Albert Davis. He explained that the parking lot was paid, but many people left their cars for several days, paying in advance. "This car has been here for 3 days," he said, checking his records. "The guy paid for a week in cash." "Can you describe him?" "Tall, about 25 to 30 years old, dark-skinned, athletic build, wearing jeans and a jacket." "Nothing special, just a regular guy." "Did he give his name?" "No, he just paid and left. I didn't ask for his ID, it's not required for parking." The detectives called a tow truck to take the car in for examination, but first they had to find out who owned it. The problem was that the license plate was carefully covered, and the VIN number on the windshield was also smeared. Spears contacted forensic expert Carter. "Can you identify the number by the engine or the body?" "Sure, it'll take some time, but we'll find all the identification numbers. Give me a couple of hours." While the car was being prepared for towing, Winston questioned several employees at the shopping center. A saleswoman at a shoe store recalled seeing 2 men approach the car the night before. "One was tall, the other shorter," she said. "They stood next to the car for about 10 minutes talking about something, then walked away toward the bus stop." "Could you identify them?" "Hardly. It was quite dark, and I was looking out the store window. I just noticed them because they looked suspicious." By the end of the day, Carter called with the results. "The VIN number has been traced," he reported. "The car is registered to a Jamal Watson, 28 years old, residing at 43 Glen Street, apartment 12. Spears wrote down the address. "What else did you find in the car?" "The interior has been thoroughly cleaned, but we found some hair on the back seat and fingerprints on the inside of the trunk. I sent it to the lab for analysis." "Any weapons?" "Nothing. If there were any guns in the car, they were removed long ago." The detectives decided not to delay and immediately drive to the address listed on the car's registration. Maple Street was located in a less than desirable part of town, where small apartment buildings stood next to abandoned shops and vacant lots. The house at number 43 was a 3-story brick building with peeling paint and broken windows on the first floor. The front door was ajar, and the lock had clearly not been used in a long time. "A perfect place for a criminal," Winston muttered as he climbed the creaky stairs. On the second floor, they found apartment number 12. The door was locked, but loud music and voices could be heard from inside. Spears knocked, his hand on his gun holster. "Jamal Watson! Police! Open up!" The music stopped abruptly, and they heard hurried footsteps and muffled voices. A few minutes later, the door opened just wide enough for a chain to be pulled across, and a young man's eye appeared in the crack. "What do you want?" "We're detectives with the Portland Police Department. We need to talk to Jamal Watson." "He's not home." "When will he be back?" "I don't know." Winston showed her badge. "Young man, we're investigating a serious crime. It's better to cooperate with us voluntarily." The chain rattled, and the door opened. Standing in the doorway was a thin guy in his 20s with a nervous expression on his face. "I'm Ricky, Jamal's neighbor. He's really not home." "When was the last time you saw him?" "The night before last. He said he was going to stay with relatives for a few days." Spears glanced into the apartment. It was messy, with empty beer bottles on the table and the smell of marijuana hanging in the air. "Who else is in the apartment?" "No one, just me. Jamal let me stay here while he's away." "Do you have Jamal's phone number?" Ricky shook his head uncertainly. "He didn't leave a number. He said he'd call when he got back." Winston noticed that the guy was clearly hiding something. His hands were shaking, and he kept looking away. "Ricky, we can get a search warrant for this apartment," she said sternly. "But it would be better if you told us everything voluntarily." "I don't know anything special. Jamal is my friend. Sometimes I stay at his place. He works odd jobs where they pay cash." "What kind of jobs?" "You know, transportation, loading and unloading, sometimes security, all kinds of things." Spears took out a photo of the car taken in the parking lot. "Is this Jamal's car?" Ricky nodded. Yeah, his Impala. Nice ride. Did he use it for work? Of course, how else? The buses are bad, and he has to get to work. The detectives realized they wouldn't get any more useful information from Ricky. They left him their business cards and asked him to tell Jamal to contact the police as soon as he returned. As they left the house, Winston expressed her doubts. This Ricky definitely knows more than he's saying, and I bet Jamal isn't staying with relatives, he's in hiding. I agree, nodded Spears. We need to find out everything we can about Jamal Watson. Criminal record, places of employment, circle of friends. They returned to the station and requested Watson's file. It turned out that the young man had several arrests for minor offenses: fighting, hooliganism, possession of small amounts of drugs. He had no serious crimes on his record, but it was clear that he was no stranger to a life of crime. The portrait of a typical perpetrator, said Winston, studying the photos from the police database. Not very smart, but willing to do anything for money. Spears contacted the local police officer to arrange for discreet surveillance of Jamal's apartment. If he showed up at home, the detectives would be notified immediately. Tomorrow morning, we'll start checking places where Watson might be hiding, he decided. We'll check his acquaintances and possible places of employment. What about the second shooter? Winston reminded him. There were 2 people on the recording. Most likely someone from Jamal's circle. Maybe Ricky's neighbor is lying to us. The day was coming to an end, but the detectives felt they were getting closer to solving the case. The killer's car had been found, and the identity of one of the suspects had been established. All that remained was to find Jamal Watson and find out who had ordered the Browning murders. So far, the business conflict theory seemed the most likely. The story with Lauren's lover looked like a typical family drama, unrelated to a professional murder. But the investigation was far from over, and the detectives knew that the most unexpected twists often happen just when the case seems almost solved. The third day of the investigation began with a report from Jerome Parker, the local police officer who had been watching the house on Maple Street. At 6:30 in the morning, he called Spears with important news. "Detective, something's definitely going on at Watson's apartment," he said over the phone. "People have been coming and going all night, and loud music is playing. It sounds like a party. Is Jamal back? I can't say for sure, but I saw the silhouettes of several people flashing by the windows. Definitely more than one." Spears glanced at his watch. It was still early, but this could be their only chance to catch the suspects off guard. "Keep watching. We're leaving in 20 minutes. He woke Winston with a phone call and explained the situation. The detectives agreed to meet at the station and bring a backup team with them. If a group of criminals had indeed gathered in the apartment, it was better to be safe than sorry. By 7 in the morning, 4 police cars had gathered outside the house on Maple Street. In addition to Spears and Winston, 6 officers in bulletproof vests were participating in the operation. LAPD Officer Parker reported that the music was still playing and the lights were on in the apartment. "They're probably drunk or high," Winston suggested, checking her gun. That could be an advantage or an added danger. Spears nodded, assigning tasks to the officers. 3, stay downstairs and block the exits. The rest of you come up with me and Winston. Remember, we're looking for Jamal Watson, but there may be other dangerous people there. They climbed the familiar creaky staircase. The music was indeed so loud that it could be heard from the first floor. Laughter, shouting, and the sound of breaking bottles came from behind the apartment door. Spears pressed his ear against the door, trying to determine how many people were inside. Judging by the sounds, there were at least 10 people inside. "Ready?" he asked the team quietly. The officers nodded and took up positions on either side of the door. Winston counted to 3 and shouted loudly, "Police! Open the door!" The music didn't stop, but the voices inside grew quieter. Apparently, not everyone understood what was going on. "Police! We have a search warrant," Spears repeated even louder. This time, someone turned off the music and a tense silence fell. Then there were hurried footsteps, whispers, and sounds like someone was hiding or throwing something away. "On 3, we break down the door," decided Spears. The officer with the battering ram prepared for action. 1, 2, 3. The The door burst open with a crash, and the police officers stormed into the apartment. The scene that met their eyes was typical of a drug den. Empty bottles and ashtrays full of cigarette butts were scattered everywhere, and the remains of white powder lay on the table. Young people between the ages of 20 and 30 were sitting or lying in different corners of the room, most of them clearly under the influence of alcohol or drugs. "Everyone on the floor! Hands behind your heads!" shouted the officers, pointing their weapons at those present. Most of the people in the apartment obeyed without resistance, too stunned by the sudden police raid. Only one guy tried to jump out the window, but he was quickly apprehended. Spears carefully examined the faces of those detained, comparing them with photos of Jamal Watson from the police database. In the corner of the room, hiding behind a pillow, sat a tall black man who matched the description exactly. "Jamal Watson?" the detective asked him. The man raised his head, and Spears was certain that this was indeed the man they were looking for. Watson looked frightened and confused. "I didn't do anything," he muttered. "It's just a party." "We'll see," Spears replied curtly. Winston walked around the room, counting the detainees. There were 11 people in the apartment, including Jamal. Among them was Ricky, the same man who had claimed yesterday that the owner of the apartment was not home. "Well, Ricky," she said, looking at the young man who was trying to hide behind the sofa. "Yesterday you said Jamal was with relatives." Ricky just shrugged guiltily, unable to come up with an excuse. All those detained were taken to the police station for questioning. It was a difficult logistical task to interrogate 11 people at the same time, but the detectives hoped that one of them would provide useful information about the murder in the restaurant. Spears started with Jamal Watson. The young man had sobered up a bit by then and understood the seriousness of his situation. He was placed in an interrogation room, a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and one-way glass. "Jamal, we know your car was used in the murder of Marvin and Lauren Browning," Spears began without preamble. "We have CCTV footage." Watson nervously wrung his hands. "I didn't kill anyone. It's my car, yes, but I wasn't driving it that day." "Then who was driving?" "I don't know. I don't remember exactly." Winston sat down opposite him and turned on a tape recorder. "Jamal, we can make this easy or hard. We have enough evidence to charge you with double murder. That's life in prison. But if you cooperate with us, we can work something out." Watson paled visibly at the mention of life in prison. "I really didn't kill anyone. I just gave them a car, that's all." "Who did you give it to?" "2 guys. They said they needed a car for a job. They paid good money." "What were their names?" "One was Derek Collins, the other—" Jamal hesitated. "The other one was Freddie Hugh." Spears wrote down their names. "Did they say what they needed the car for?" "No, and I didn't ask. When someone pays you $2,000 to borrow a car for one night, you don't ask questions." "Where can we find Derek and Freddie?" "I don't know. They're not from around here. Someone brought them to a party at a friend's house a week ago, and that's where we met them." Winston frowned. "You give your car to strangers for $2,000? "They were with Vince Cartwright. Vince is a good guy. I've known him for a long time." "Is Vince Cartwright among those arrested?" "Yes, the tall guy with the tattoo on his neck." The detectives decided to question Cartwright immediately. Vince turned out to be a man in his mid-20s with numerous tattoos and an aggressive look. Unlike Jamal, he was more confident. "Vince, we need information about Derek Collins and Freddie Hugh," Spears said. "You brought them to Jamal." "So what?" Cartwright replied defiantly. "I'm not a babysitter for everyone I meet. They killed 2 people using Jamal's car. You could be an accessory to murder." Vince's expression changed. He clearly hadn't expected the matter to be so serious. "Hey, wait a minute. I just met the guys. Derek said they needed a car to transport some cargo. No one mentioned murder." "How do you know Derek and Freddie?" "I met them at a bar on Main Street 3 weeks ago. They were looking for work and said they'd do anything for good money." "What else do you know about them?" Vince shrugged. "Derek is tall, about 30, always wears a black leather jacket. Freddie is shorter, stocky. Both are black, say they moved here from Boston." "Where do they live?" "They're renting a room at the Road Star Motel on the outskirts of town. At least that's where they were staying a week ago." Spears wrote down the motel address. It was the first real lead on the killers. "Vince, if you're hiding something, you'd better tell us now," Winston warned. "We'll find out anyway." "I swear, that's all I know. I just introduced them to Jamal, that's all." The detectives returned to questioning the other detainees, but most of them had nothing useful to report. They were just small-time drug dealers and alcoholics who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. By noon, the detectives had a clear picture. Jamal Watson had given his car to two professional hitmen who had used it to murder the Brownings. Now they had to find those hitmen. The Roadstar Motel was located at the entrance to the city, next to a gas station and a 24-hour diner. It was a typical place for travelers passing through and people who didn't want to stay in decent hotels. The motel manager, an elderly woman with a tired look, immediately recognized Derek and Freddie from the description. "Room 17, she said. "Paid for a week in advance, cash. Quiet guests, no trouble." "Are they in the room now?" "Their car is in the parking lot, but I haven't seen them since yesterday morning." Spears looked out the window at the parking lot. There was an old Toyota Camry with Massachusetts license plates. "Give us the key to room 17, he asked. "We have reason to believe that these people have committed a serious crime." The woman handed over the key without objection. She was apparently used to visits from the police. Room 17 was on the second floor of the motel. The detectives climbed the outside stairs and approached the door cautiously. It was quiet inside. No voices or movement could be heard. Spears quietly inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door opened without a squeak. The room was small, 2 beds, a television, and a small table. 2 men were lying on one of the beds, apparently sleeping after a rough night. "Police! Hands up!" Spears shouted, pointing his gun at the sleeping men. The men woke up instantly but were too stunned to resist. One of them, tall and thin, matched Derek's description exactly. The second, stocky and muscular, must have been Freddie. "Derek Collins and Freddie Hugh, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder," Winston announced, handcuffing the tall man. "We didn't do anything," Derek tried to protest, but his voice sounded unconvincing. During a search of the room, detectives found 2 9mm pistols hidden under the mattress and an envelope containing $5,000 in cash. "Money for the job?" Spears asked, showing the envelope. Freddie remained silent, but it was clear from his face that any attempts to deny it were pointless. At the police station, the killers were placed in separate rooms for questioning. Spears decided to start with Freddie, who seemed less confident of the two. "Freddie, we found a gun and money on you, and we have witnesses who saw you take the car from Jamal," the detective began. "The camera footage shows you entering the restaurant and killing the Brownings. The case against you is ironclad." Freddie Hugh was a man in his late 20s with rough features and several gold teeth. He shook his head nervously, clearly weighing his options. "We didn't want to kill anyone," he finally said. "It was a job, you know. We were paid to do it." "Who paid you?" "Some guy got in touch with us through mutual acquaintances. He said we had to take out 2 people. He offered $20,000 for the job." Winston leaned forward. "What did the client look like?" "Young, well-dressed, dark-skinned, medium height. He spoke very politely, educated, not like your usual clients." "Did he give you his name?" "Tyler. I don't remember his last name. I didn't write it down." Spears and Winston exchanged glances. Tyler worked at a bank. That fit the description of Lauren's lover given by her friend Candace. "Tell me more about your meeting with the client." Freddie leaned back in his chair. "He found us through a guy in Boston who knew we did this kind of work. We met at a cafe on the outskirts of town a week ago. Tyler showed us photos of a man and a woman and told us where to find them." "Did he explain his motives?" "He just said that these people ruined his life and he wanted justice. We didn't ask for details." "How was the payment supposed to work?" "He gave us half up front and promised the rest after the job was done. We were supposed to contact him today." "Do you have his phone number?" Freddie nodded and dictated the number. Spears wrote down the digits and passed them on to the technical department to identify the owner. An hour later, the answer came back. The number was registered to Tyler Rivers, 28 years old, manager at Portland Trust Bank. His home address was 231 Oak Avenue, apartment 4B. "Lauren's lover," Winston stated. "So the business conflict theory was wrong." Time to pick up our customer, Spears decided. Tyler Rivers lived in a modern residential complex in a nice part of town. It was an apartment building for young professionals, with a concierge, parking, and a small gym. Clearly not the kind of place where people who order murders usually live. The concierge confirmed that Mr. Rivers was home. He had gone up to his apartment about an hour ago and hadn't left since. The detectives went up to the 4th floor and knocked on the door of apartment 4B. The door was opened by a young man of medium height with an attractive appearance and a worried expression on his face. He was dressed in an expensive suit, his hair neatly combed. He was exactly the kind of man you would expect to find working as a bank manager. "Tyler Rivers?" asked Spears. "Yes, that's me. What's the matter?" "We're detectives with the Portland Police Department. We need to talk to you about Lauren Browning." Tyler's face changed instantly. His confidence vanished, replaced by fear and confusion. I don't understand what you're talking about." "Mr. Rivers, it would be best if you invited us into the apartment," Winston said. "We have some serious questions." Tyler reluctantly stepped aside, letting the detectives inside. The apartment was tastefully furnished: leather couches, modern appliances, books on the shelves. Bank documents and financial statements lay on the coffee table. "Mr. Rivers, we know about your relationship with Lauren Browning," Spears began, without sitting down. "And we've arrested the people who killed her and her husband on your orders." Tyler sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "It's not what you think," he muttered. "Then explain what it is." There was silence in the room for several minutes. Tyler struggled with himself, deciding whether to tell the truth or continue to deny it. Finally, he raised his head and looked at the detectives. "I loved her," he said quietly. "I loved her madly, more than anyone else in my life." Winston sat down across from him and turned on the tape recorder. "Tell me about your relationship with Lauren." "We met 8 months ago. She came to the bank to take out a loan for the insurance company she worked for. I was her manager. I knew right away that she was special." "How did the relationship start?" "Not right away. At first we just talked at work. Then we started going out to business lunches. Lauren was so beautiful, smart, charming, I couldn't think about anything else." "Did she reciprocate your feelings?" Tyler smiled bitterly. "At first it seemed like she did. We started seeing each other secretly, spending time together. Lauren said I was different from her husband, that I was interesting and passionate." "What changed?" "A month ago, she said she couldn't continue our relationship, that it was a mistake, and she wanted to save her marriage to Marvin." Spears noticed Tyler's hands clench into fists at the mention of Lauren's husband. "How did you react to her decision?" "I begged her not to do it. I told her I'd do anything for her. I offered to run away together, start a new life. I have money, connections." "But she refused." "Yes, and then she said something that broke my heart." Tyler fell silent, clearly reliving painful memories. "What exactly did she say?" Winston asked gently. "That I was just entertainment to her, a toy. That she never planned to leave her husband for some young boy who had imagined something that wasn't there." Lauren's words had obviously hurt Tyler deeply. His voice was filled with pain mixed with rage. "And then you decided to get revenge?" "I couldn't let it go!" he exclaimed, jumping up from his chair. "She used me, played with my feelings, and then threw me away like a piece of trash." "So you ordered the murder of not only her, but Marvin as well?" Tyler paced the room, trying to calm himself. "If I can't be with her, then no one else can. And Marvin, he was part of her choice. They both had to pay for what they did to me." "How did you find the killers?" "I have a client at the bank who has connections to the criminal world. He put me in touch with the right people for a fee." "Did you regret your decision?" Tyler stopped at the window, staring out at the street. "Until the last minute, I hoped Lauren would change her mind, call me, tell me she wanted to be with me. But she didn't call." "And after the murder?" "After the murder, I realized I had made a terrible mistake. Lauren is dead, and it didn't bring me any relief, only emptiness and horror at what I've done." The detectives exchanged glances. The confession was complete and convincing. Tyler Rivers, out of jealousy and a thirst for revenge, had ordered the murder of the woman he claimed to love. "Mr. Rivers, you are under arrest for the murder of Marvin and Lauren Browning," Winston announced, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Tyler didn't resist. He seemed almost relieved that the truth was finally out. "I want you to know," he said as the detectives led him to the exit, "I really loved Lauren. I just loved her wrong." In the car on the way to the station, Spears summed up the investigation. 3 days, and the case is solved, he said. "Sometimes crimes seem more complicated than they really are. The saddest thing is that 2 innocent people died because of a young man's immature emotions," Winston replied. "Tyler destroyed not only the Browning family's lives, but his own as well." "What about the perpetrators?" "Derek and Freddie will get life for first-degree murder. Jamal and Vince will get 5 to 10 years for aiding and abetting. Justice will prevail." The Browning case was closed. Detectives Spears and Winston could move on to their next investigation, but the memory of how love could turn into deadly hatred would stay with them for a long time.